Okay. All right, go ahead. You're up.
Right, so guys, so we're going to talk today about we're going to focus on the upstream part of the revenue system, right? The quality of the traffic, the effectiveness of the website, and really how prospects will enter the sales pipeline from the digital system. Um, and as Ken had mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit more about the tools. Now, the tools I'm going to, just so that we don't go back and forth on slides and live versus none, or the presentation, I'm just going to mention them verbally. And then, of course, after the webinar, we'll send out the details so that you can take a look at them. So, for example, some of the tools we're going to talk about are that kind of are hot top level: Google Analytics, Google Search Console, which is one I tell you that nobody pays attention to. If you ask me what's the difference between the two, Google Analytics is about the traffic to your website. Google Search Console, if you're not familiar with it, is how Google interprets your website and how it identifies problems within your website. So if you haven't used Google Search Console before, I highly suggest you jump into it. Another one, are your CRM systems, whether you're using HubSpot or Zoho or something else. I mean, those are all tools that are part of this process. And one that a lot of people aren't perhaps as aware of is Looker Studio. It's also a Google product, and its concept is to be able to take multiple data sources, bring them all together into one dashboard, and then be able to cross-reference the data. Now, Looker Studio is a little more complicated. I do suggest that if you're not technical, that you might want to find somebody, let's say on Fiverr or Upwork, that knows how to build out the Looker Studio dashboards and how to build out the process and the data. And so on that note, let's move on to the revenue flow here. And so what I'm going to talk about here is what most businesses think about sales as a primary driver of revenue, but revenue actually flows through an entire ecosystem. In other words, traffic leads to conversion. Conversion creates sales conversations. Those conversations create revenue, right? And so when you think about that process or that flow from start to finish, that's essentially the process, how the ecosystem works. And so if you think about the traffic entering the system, is it weak? Or is it poorly targeted? Is it the quality that you're looking for? And more importantly, which Ken's going to get to later, is does the sales team end up doing extra work based on what has come into the funneling system? And so improving that front end of this ecosystem, of the system and the process, obviously will benefit the sales team. They won't have headaches, and they'll be able to be more effective in what they do. As far as tools are concerned, when we think about this, I mentioned Google Analytics, but then you might want to take a look at tools like SEMrush or Ahrefs as an example. These are tools third-party tools that are looking from the outside in about your website, for that matter, your competitor's website as well. When we think about focusing in on data about your intended customer profile, your ICP, ZoomInfo, Apollo, right? And then, of course, we mentioned the CRM systems, but those are four that really come to mind when it comes to how you're going to work through this process. We can jump to the next one. And so, where we want to take this essentially is the confusion between activities and results. Sales teams can be extremely active, sending emails, making phone calls, a lot of activities. But if the leads entering that pipeline are weak, the activity doesn't translate into revenue. And what we have to take a look at is, and the most common issue, at least from my standpoint and from a marketing standpoint, is the intent traffic. Now, that's something new. Ken was mentioning how things change very quickly in the last year. One of the critical items that we have now available to us is identifying intent by your ICP, meaning that we're able to use ZoomInfo, Apollo, we're able to use other third-party sources that allow us to identify, basically you punch in your ICP and they're able to spit back out to you that, hey, look, these companies and these contacts are looking for your services. That's essentially what intent comes to. So when we're talking about increasing the quality of that of the inbound traffic and therefore the funnel, the sales funnel, being able to go right to intent, to the intent ICP is the best way to increase that quality. In other words, it's not, what I'm getting at is we're not trying to chase down volumes of traffic to the website. I think the days of, hey, how many people am I getting to my website really is gone by the wayside. We need to take a look at the quality of the visitors coming into the website. And in the B2B world, that's a very difficult situation when there's so much noise on the web, especially after the pandemic. So what we want to be able to do is figure out how to increase the conversions on the website. And we want obviously we want to take this down the path where we're reducing the problems when it comes to marketing inputs. A few tools that we're talking about here would include, again, you'll notice I've got Google Analytics on every slide. But you want to keep in touch with what's going on from Google Analytics. You might use Hotjar or Microsoft Clarity. My suggestion is Microsoft Clarity because it's all free and mind-boggling the amount of information that Microsoft is able to provide you relative to tracking your website visitors. Of course, the third one is going to be your CRM system and your pipeline reporting. And another one will be your lead scoring tools. This is where HubSpot comes into play, or Salesforce, or your CRM system in general, but you want to kind of keep track of these things as you're going through this process. We can skip to the next one. So as you can imagine, AI, big deal. There's no question about it. And we have to look at AI as the new search engines. There's no question about it. AI is dramatically changing how buyers discover companies. But the only way that AI is able to do that is if your company has notable references on the internet. And what that means, and interestingly enough, Wikipedia wants that. Interestingly enough, Google has always wanted that. But now that AI is on the market, and AI doesn't have a database like Google does, where it's gathering all this information, and then when somebody says, "I want XYZ, please, let me see what you have out there," AI does it on the fly. And so when AI is doing it on the fly, it has to be able to reference something that says, yep, this is a reputable company, this is a reputable business, and I've got, let's say, Yahoo Finance, I've got, Time Magazine, I've got, I'm trying to give you some extreme examples, but my point is you want your website's information, your articles, your mentions, etc., being on these high value target websites. And so it's not just about what's in your website, but also where, and it's not just what's about you outside of your website, but where your information resides. So just on social media is not going to do the trick anymore, at least not for AI. And you need to be able to use structured and earn visibility to generate that credibility that AI is looking for. And this is a huge shift from where we were. When a company has strong third-party mentions, press coverage, which, one of the things I was talking about earlier is we developed a new B2B press release marketing service, and it is specifically designed for visibility and credibility. More than anything, actually, the visibility is easy. It's the credibility part that's important. And so You want to be able to tap into the press and the news networks. It's the one way that B2B companies can rise above the noise. No question about it. We've got our case studies on it. They certainly tell a great story. And so by doing this, you're focusing again on leads that'll have higher intent, tied in, especially with the intent data we talked about earlier. And we want to be able to have those quality leads flowing into the sales pipeline. In terms of tools, again, ChatGPT, Perplexity, or Claude, or whichever um, LLM you want to use for AI discoverability. Definitely, I would suggest go to ChatGPT. A very simple exercise I always ask people to do: go to ChatGPT and ask it to recommend companies in your industry or the products or the services you provide. Take a look at the results, and I will tell you, in today's world, probably 100% of those you won't be there. So your next question to your GPT is going to be, why did you not recommend me? When you get that, you're going to get a laundry list of amazing things for you to do so that the AI world can recommend you. And so this is an easy exercise. And along with that, I will tell you that amongst that list of to-dos, one of them is going to be that it requires the schema code for each web page of your website, and it's also called the JSON script. Just ask ChatGPT, for example, give it your homepage URL, ask it to give you the schema code. All you have to do is copy paste that directly into your homepage. And with that, and obviously you can do that with all your pages, depending on how big your website is. But that's a good starting point. If you can't do the entire list, that's where I would start. And that will certainly help to facilitate being seen or being recommended, referenced within the AI world. And with that, we can keep going. So let's talk about conversion rate optimization. And what we're really talking about is how do we take the website visitors and how do we generate more leads from the traffic that's already coming to your website. In other words, we're not saying, hey, let's drive more traffic to the website. Rather, let's take the traffic we're getting, figure out how to generate more leads out of them, and that also translates into a more effective website. And so, majority of the business websites out there really don't convert, or they convert very low. In other words, how many leads are you getting per month? 10, 20, 30? Well, what if that were to be 30, 60, 90, for example? And so the process, or the marketing process, called conversion rate optimization, it's about focusing on how to improve what happens when a website visitor comes to your website. So it's less expensive. If you can get your website to convert, that means you don't have to spend as much money trying to do demand generation. You don't have to spend more. You don't have to worry about spending more money on ads and so on and so forth. That's going to help to move the needle, basically, and companies will be able to increase their revenue by improving how existing traffic converts and interacts within your website. And mind you, it doesn't require a lot in terms of what does this take. So what does it take? It takes an AI tool that creates active call to actions. It requires a heat map so you can identify what people are doing over on the website. And and here I am again saying the same thing. You need to be able to use Google Analytics. You want to take a tap into Microsoft Clarity, and you're going to want to take a look at tools that, like we said earlier, like the SEM Rush, because what you're going to see is all these third-party tools. As you improve the results of your website, you're going to see these third-party tools also changing how they interpret your website, and therefore by default, you're going to see that you're going to start getting more traffic, whether you intended it or not. And with that, we can move on to probably getting close to the end here. The case study. So let's talk about this one. So we had some interesting case studies when it comes to CRO, and I think this is an important part of being able to measure. It's about measuring, it's about reporting, it's about analytics and interpretation of the results. So what does it all mean? And it's not about taking one data source, because I think you've probably seen in the previous slides that we were talking about, I'm never talking about one single source that's going to give you the right answer. You need to use multiple data sources to bring it all together. And by doing that, you're going to be able to analyze the user experience. You're going to be able to identify several areas where there's friction between your website and the visitors. And as you start to make those changes, you're going to see that the traffic is going to stay on your website, meaning your engagement rate is going to go up. But simultaneously, you should, if the engagement rate goes up, you're going to see that you're going to generate more conversions. In other words, more leads from the traffic within the website. I can tell you that, again, I don't want to take all of our time up, but we do have a case study where literally we increased the conversions by 198% over a 12-month program that we were doing with this client. The program wasn't just about the conversion rate. We were also doing a lot of other marketing activities. But when it came to what happened when the website visitors got to the website, based on where they were before we started and where they were 12 months later, and that was a 3-year program actually, but in the first 12 months, we were able to change the number of conversions that they were getting from the existing traffic.
We have a question here.
So
the question is that, as technology evolves in marketing and sales, that there's confusion between the roles. And as technology changes, it impacts, marketing and sales. And what questions do you ask or directions do you suggest for teams to adjust their scope so that they are confused and overlapping?
Yeah. So that's an interesting question. And I've seen this type of scenario before. Number one is marketing is about branding. Marketing is about public relations. Marketing is about getting the brand and the information out to the marketplace. That has a strategy. It has a process. It has activities, and it has tasks. And last but not least, you have to measure everything you're doing. I don't see the sales team having time to do that. Marketing's purpose in life is to give support to the sales team. Marketing's entire focus in life is to give support to the business development team. And marketing and business development is what's helping to support sales. And so when you look at it from that standpoint and you take a look at like, for example, business development is about relationship building, and not just, with your target audience, but within a surrounding group of a network that's going to ultimately refer business to you. That process and what needs to be done there is different. When we're talking about sales, we're saying that, hey, here are a whole bunch of leads, go close them. That's a separate process, and it should not be confused with what marketing is all about, what business development is all about, and ultimately, what is it that sales should be focusing in on? At least I hope that answers the question. Ken, I'm sure you're going to dig right into that later.
Yeah, it's. I think where the confusion really comes in is like who owns what information and how you're using it, and this is where it should be making things a lot easier. I mean, when I first started in sales, we didn't even pay attention to what marketing was doing. They were just providing us with stuff to hand out or whatever, and now you can't you can't really, you have to coexist. And you know, when I have a client and the sales team's complaining about the quality of the leads they get from marketing, I just tell them it's your fault. Okay, you should be telling them, who is it that you want to be meeting with? Who do you want the attention of? And what's going to get their attention? And you know, there's got to be some regular coordination between marketing and sales to perfect that. It's then how you take the data and how you're measuring the data, and how that is being utilized by each team to really make marketing and sales more effective. And
I think I think
go
the
ahead.
answer to the, you brought up an interesting question, sort of who owns the data. The Everybody owns the data.
Right.
The data is in the center,
Who owns
right?
using it? Who owns using it and evaluating it? And you know, this is something I'm going to talk about too in my presentation, is about how AI can really help you with that. But you know, it's you know, we have, you know, your chief marketing officer and you have your chief sales officer. Well, now there's a chief enablement officer. There's a whole new category right now,
Yeah.
and that's the person who really owns
Yeah.
taking the data from both, and you know, from the ERP and the CRM and from your marketing data, and actually, you know, producing you know, usable and measurable results from it. And it's an interesting
There's a,
evolution. Go ahead.
yeah, and I don't want to get into my 4 A's of change, but yeah, that's
It's
ultimately
great though.
accept the
It's
changes and move forward and figure out how to work together. I think
yeah, yeah,
that's ultimately the goal here.
right.
And on that note, I think I have one more slide left, and just to
Okay.
close things out. Um, so very similarly to what Ken just said, you have everything falling into the sales funnel, right? And if the top of that sales funnel, meaning whatever's coming in from the website and the other digital sources, doesn't have the quality that it requires, then the marketing inputs are a problem. Okay. This is where sales and marketing have to work together to figure out where's the friction source of all of this. And again, this is why I was mentioning that sales and marketing are very distinct in their disciplines, because marketing is a problem-solving discipline. And so when you're talking about identifying that friction, it's marketing trying to figure out how to solve that friction, how to solve that problem. I don't see sales individuals, professional sales guys, don't have the necessary discipline for problem solving. Marketers do. And this is where the two work together. And this is where we want to make sure that marketing inputs and sales execution are combined. And therefore, the goal is not just more activity, the goal is better inputs that produce better results. That's kind of the direction that we want to go. Um, the tools I mentioned earlier are all, pretty much the same thing, where you're going to use the CRM, you're going to use the analytics dashboard. My suggestion is to go directly to Looker Studio, because to be perfectly honest with you, Google Analytics has become more complicated. In order to extract the data, I believe that everybody is going to find that Looker Studio is a better tool to use. And more importantly, I think using AI-driven search and discovery tools will help you improve how the rest of the world views your website and views your brand, and whether or not you're the one that they're going to recommend. And
How
on
do you
that
spell
note,
that? Studio? What is it?
Looker Studio,
How do you spell that?
Looker, Looker Studio,
Loker. Okay, thank you.
Loo, like the word look.
Cool.
Yeah,
I learned something.
you bet.
All right, are you all set?
I'm up. I'm good to
All
go.
right. Any questions before we move on? Okay. All right. Okay, there we go. All right, now I'm gonna get my deck going here. All right,
Just
again,
a quick question.
yeah.
Do you guys will have this webinar, actually the recording, also sent by email or something like that?
Yeah, send me an email. I usually, it's too big to email, so I usually put it up on YouTube and I can share the link. Yes.
That will be perfect. Thank you
Yeah,
very much. Thank you.
but send me a an email to remind me who wants it. If you want it, just send me an email and I'll send you a link. Okay. All right. So here's the I'm going to be talking about sales, and why is it hold on a second. All right, well, anyway, um you know what I tell clients is a salesperson's two greatest assets are their time and their relationships. Okay. And the tools we're going to be talking about, it's tools and resources and systems are really designed to help salespeople be more efficient with their time and to develop better relationships and know who to spend their time with. Okay. And what happens is, I find that my clients, when I first started working with them, they're really reactive because like I said, I deal with a lot with manufacturing companies and they have customers and the customers keep coming and requesting quotes or needing things from them. And so they're just reacting to that. And they should. You've got to take care of your customers. That's number one, right? But then they end up maybe spending too much time with the biggest customers. Would you need to? They deserve it, but they're not really getting enough new because they're so busy with their existing customers. And then they may end up spending more time than they should with really low value clients. There's always that 80-20 rule going on, okay? And or perhaps because they're being reactive, there are strategically important products that don't get the appropriate attention, or they're just tracking their pipeline and not really the lead indicators so that, are they really spending their time the most efficiently? Okay. And so it's very simple. And usually, when I first start working with a client, I'm like, all right, well, send me a list of all, your customers and how much they bought over the last 3 years and how many quotes did you do? Because, it's and they don't always do this. It's very easy today. You could just take your existing database and really realize, okay, who are your top tier customers? And it's not uncommon that your top tier may be one customer or two or three. And it's tier three where maybe that's where your best opportunities are. And how many of those really can you double or increase your business from, or how many tier fours can be tier threes? And I find, companies aren't always spending enough time on that, where it's easy now to take that information and to be able to get some good information. I just got a list of customers from a client that sells through distribution partners pretty much entirely, and they have maybe 5 sales reps, and I got that information, and so they have all of the quotes that they put out for the last year and how many closed. Well, they have another category which is I think they call it stalled or whatever. They called it what they call it? I had it open here. What did they call it? They called it inactive. So they have a cat closed one, closed lost, and inactive. Okay, what does inactive mean? Right? Then there's a lot of them. So I asked ChatGPT to take, to here's what I have in this table. I gave them all the columns and the customers, and the ChatGPT wrote all of the equations. So now I have a summary table for each customer. How many inactives are they? How many closes there are? How many quotes they did? What the close rate is? You know what all that data is for each rep. Okay, so now I know which ones. Some have all inactive. Okay, what does that mean? Well, how many of those inactives were a waste of time, or how many of those inactives are things that you could have been closing? And so this is information now we can take and then find out really what's going on, so that we can help these people be more efficient. Okay, and then there's relationships. Wasting time with people who just don't buy, or they buy from them. This is the systems thing. What is their process to make sure they're not wasting time, that they're working on things that actually are going to happen, and when are they going to happen? What needs to happen for them to be ready to buy, and then setting themselves up with future agendas so that they can follow up appropriately, or know that they don't need to. And then a lot of times they're reliant on independent agents or resellers where they have limited control over that. So how are they using data that's available to them readily to really set expectations in the territories they expect them to be working, so that they are making sure that their activities are happening to help them penetrate the markets the way they expect. Okay, or their long sales cycles. I hear that often. Okay, well, why is it a long sales cycle? Well, there's long. I have clients that really they make a sale after they get a clinical trial approved. That's a 3-year sales cycle. It really doesn't matter, because if you have a 6-month sales cycle, and you're kind of like, at a low point in productivity or in revenue, it's not what you're doing now that's creating the problem. It's what you did 6 months ago. Okay, and so as long as you're continuing with the activity, that your marketing programs and your prospecting programs are producing for you on a regular basis, it shouldn't matter how long your sales cycle are, because you're closing stuff now that you started to work on 6 months ago. Okay, or and you end up really with costs that are higher than your industry average, just because of efficiencies. And there's a lot at our disposal now to improve on that. Or is your retention rate low, where you need to really pay attention to what's causing that, or they're spending just too much time on administrative things. Okay, so these are the things that I'm going to be talking about, right? And so for the whole sales process, really, there's ways to improve the efficiency of your sales efforts. And in order to do that, you really need to know how efficient they are at each stage. So we talked about marketing in the first part of this webinar. Now I'm going to start talking about prospecting activities, and how is your team building trust? What is it that they're doing, the top producers, to build trust in a better way than your average producers or your lower producers? And are they using agendas to really make sure that they're working on things that are worth following up on, and setting themselves up to control that process? And how well are they qualifying their opportunities? Is there really a compelling reason for a customer to do something or change what they're doing? And are they committed to changing? And how would that decision be made? Who's involved in the decision process? Are they meeting with everybody involved in the process? Do they know what needs to happen for them to make a decision? And do they know when that will happen? And are you on the same page with the financial investment and what they're willing to invest in, when, and how that will happen? Okay, and so the presentations are a lot more spot on, because they've had all that the conversation about all those things, and you're on the same page. So it takes the pressure off the presentation, and then how they're handling objections and making sure after you close the deal they don't back out, and how you're setting up implementation plans so that everybody's expectations are met and that you create a loyal customer. Okay, and these are all measurable elements, right? So the challenge here is, are you getting the data so that you can really measure how efficient your team is at every step of this process? Everybody measures sales. You got to measure sales because you need to invoice your customers, right? But it's like, the first sales efficiency is measured in ratios, okay? And your first ratio is, what's the average deal size? So do your salespeople really know what their formula is? Because the formula is based on how many deals they need to close, which is based on what is your average customer value, okay? And that's your first ratio. So the number of closes that you make will determine whether you're staying on track based on that average deal size. And usually there's a variety of types of opportunities that you get, okay? Next is proposals. What's your proposal close rate? Do you really know? What percentage of those proposals are actually becoming closed deals? And what's the difference between your close rate between existing customers and net new, okay? Or how many appointments is it taking for you to close the deal? So if you know that, now your salespeople know how many meetings they need to have every week or every month in order to stay on track, to always be closing the amount of revenue they need every month, okay? Or how many contacts. Sorry?
If I could interject real
Yeah,
quickly,
go
I
ahead.
apologize. But, I'm looking at this slide, and then you also mentioned something just a minute ago. And if we go back to the conversation of marketing versus sales and how marketing, business development, sales all work, one of the things I mentioned is that the disciplines are so different, right? And I'm looking at this list, for example. This is a prospecting discipline as far as what sales guys do. It's a process that's so significantly different compared to what marketing does, compared to what business development does. Right here, you can see exactly that what a salesperson is working on, the process that they work through to do that, to prospect, to follow up, to stay in contact with everybody, to send out the proposals, to follow up on the proposals, etc. That's a whole nother discipline. It really changes the landscape as far as, when you look at marketing, you look at business development, you look at sales, they're three very different disciplines that need to figure out how to work together.
Yeah, exactly. I was talking about contacts, how many contacts it take to get a first meeting. If you're cold calling, how many dials is it taking for you to make a contact? And then how many leads do you need to be generating on your own or to get from marketing every week or every month? And then what's your lead conversion and which channels are producing for you and which ones aren't, okay? And so if you look at this data, rarely do my clients give me all the data that I need to be able to calculate this before we start working together, okay? And when you look at the secondary bullets, the ones that are indented, that's the efficiency ratios. So when I get this information, I know exactly every week, every month, how efficient they are at every stage of the sales process. So I know if they're stuck, where are they stuck? I also know how efficient they are at every single stage of that process. And you can take a look at what are your top producers doing compared to the average, okay? So here's Michaela Schifrin, right? This is her finishing her slalom run where she got the gold medal, okay? And if you think there's a difference between if the top producers and the average producers, there's like a 1/10 of a second difference between getting a gold medal and getting, a silver. And there was a um, half of a second difference between whether you get a medal or not. Okay,
Isn't that
and
crazy?
when you think about that, it's like, what do they track that? Do they know what were the elements that made a difference? She went last, okay, and these people who were second and third, they went early. And so I watched racers keep going and going and going, and the commentators are saying, well, they're making tight turns, or they're keeping this line, or they're trying to evaluate what makes the difference between somebody who's going to be a tenth of a second better. Okay. And they started saying, well, it's getting warmer. The conditions are changing, because nobody was surpassing those top three. Nobody was. And then she went last, and she got the gold. Okay. But when you look at the difference between gold and silver, the 1.5 between the 1.39, it's a 39% improvement. 39%. And the difference between her and the fourth place person who didn't get a medal, I'm sorry, gold and silver was 8% improvement. The difference between her and fourth place was 39% improvement. And the difference between the last one there was a 93% improvement. Okay. So when you look at your potential for improvement of performance, take what your top producers are doing and divide it by your average producers. The good news is that with salespeople, you've got a lot more opportunity than if you were an Olympic skier. Okay, so take this for example. You have your top producer that's getting 25 meetings per month, and your average is getting 8. Okay, that's a 3 times improvement potential. So the average producer has the potential to double the amount of revenue they're bringing in, just by saying, all right, what are they doing to get those meetings that makes them so much more effective? Okay. And, if you have the ratios, then you're able to do this kind of an analysis. Okay. So, where the real differences are now is we can get better data on the market. We can, I did that with another client I was meeting with today, who was looking at what's happening in the market. And we did some ChatGPT analysis on, what's happening. It's a good starting point. Okay. But you can get a lot of data from the marketplace now. You can also get better contact information. Eli brought up Apollo a couple of times, and and intent data. So I'm going to be talking about that a little bit more. Data you can get out of your CRM and your ERP systems, okay? And systems that you can put in place to monitor your performance and really keep track of these efficiency ratios. I mean, a lot of times I just have them take it out of their ERP system or their CRM and just give it to me, so we can keep track of it in spreadsheets. Either way, whatever's easiest to do, and look at their conversion ratios and their efficiency. Okay, resource data. Your best resource are customers. What are your customers doing, and what are the trends there? Okay, and ask them. Okay, you can go to the web and get information. If it's a public company, is talking to another customer today that was dealing with biotech and tech startups. Well, if you're getting a private equity investment, you have to submit a Form D to the SEC. Or if you're a public company, you have to file 10-Ks every quarter. That's public information you can get from the Edgar database. Industry reports. I read the Boston Business Journal. I just want to keep track of what's trending in the different sectors in Boston. LinkedIn, is LinkedIn's like the biggest professional network in the world. It's 1.3 billion people on LinkedIn, and they're all professionals. I mean, I used to do a webinar on LinkedIn on a regular basis. I started doing it in 2015. Back then, there were 280 million. Okay, and every Fortune 500 company's there, and so you can, if you're on Navigator, you get a lot more robust data management on there. I'm in the process of recruiting another trainer, and basically took out a good quality list based on criteria off a Navigator, dumped it in an automated system I'm using called Buzz.ai, and I was automatically sending connection requests asking people, hey, I saw your profile when I was looking for another trainer. Are you working full time? Well, I tell you, I got some pretty darn good. I'm having a real hard time making a choice. and but LinkedIn, you can get some really good data from, and now there's a lot of tools that scrape that information and give you their contact information. Research that you can do, ChatGPT. I already told you how I used it today, this morning, to get to easily calculate ratios and data from my clients' customer information. Okay. The target lists, again, this data is becoming a lot more better quality with AI. And so in the mid-level, Eli mentioned Apollo, they seem to be getting a lot of traction. I think I'm going to be giving them another try. Mid-level, sales intel. I had my salesperson take a look at that recently, and they told her they have 1,200 people who exist just to verify the quality of their phone numbers. And so they're kind of mid-level price-wise, like Dun & Bradstreet. I haven't looked at them in quite a while. ZoomInfo is a 10,000-pound gorilla, but I do think with AI, these other systems are really catching up to them, and I'm not sure they're, my opinion is they're going to have a hard time justifying their price. And then
They're going to have to change. They're going to have to change.
I think so.
No question. We have a client that uses them, and I know exactly how much they're paying every year. So
yeah, well, actually, the client I was with today, she said she's used both ZoomInfo and Apollo, and she really hasn't found a whole lot of difference in quality. But when we were
because
on Apollo,
the intent data is coming from specific sources, and it doesn't make any sense to pay what ZoomInfo is offering. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Okay. So then in terms of prospecting, right, we get our clients working 4 active channels, but you got to select the channels that really make sense for your ideal client profile, and then measure, how well that activity is producing, leads to where you want to be meeting, and then what's your return on invested time? Because it varies. Your formula will vary depending on which channels you're working. If you're cold calling, typically is 2% return on invested time. And my salesperson spends a lot of time cold calling because, our target audience, they actually answer the phone. And, but in some markets they don't. And so, but you've got to talk to, maybe 50 people before you close a deal, and as you move up and you get into like alliance partnerships where there's somebody who actually has a good relationship with the person who's introducing you, and they're there expecting your call, then that's more of a 95% return on invested time. Okay. And then you really be real diligent in using the tools to deepen and improve the efficiency of your list. I mean, in sales, it starts with the quality of your list, right? And so you want to do some deep research to get to your ideal client profile. Then scoring and prioritizing, this is where, it's similar that your marketing is scoring the activity that you're seeing on your website, for example. This is what Milay was talking about. But the same thing is with sales, all right? So how are you scoring the opportunity? I mean, did they meet with the decision maker? Are they really, do they have a next action plan that's real? And so how much of that qualification process actually really happened? And so scoring is a lot more effective. Our tools are more proficient at really helping us to project, our success. And then, you can use AI to really determine what messaging is having a better result. Okay. And there's tools that you can, now record your salespeople. Like Gong was basically just a tool that was, initially just to record your salespeople's calls, and then you do an AI analysis on it. Okay, are they talking? Are they asking questions? What was the response? What was the emotion level of the customer? And you can really get a good analysis on it. But now they've added a lot of other tools in there to be able to really help score and evaluate your opportunities. So there's a lot of tools out there to do that. And then there's a plethora of tools that to help you to automate your outreach.
Hey, Ken, real quickly, we got a comment here. Let me read
Okay,
it.
go ahead.
There's enormous value in creating a dashboard the entire team has access to, both sales and marketing teams, so they know the performance metrics and can get focused on continuous improvement measures.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
agree. Yeah, you
Yes.
need that
No,
central data source that we talked about earlier with sharing the data, so everybody's got access to the same data.
right, right. And so that here's the dilemma, right? And I said, rarely are our clients able to give me the data that I'm looking for to be able to do this kind of evaluation on efficiency. And the problem is that as these tools get more and more sophisticated, it's harder to get that data. Okay. And so I think that, we're both giving you kind of a fire hose here. And what we need to do is really just pick what are the one or two things that you could start doing right now that's really going to help you to pinpoint efficiencies and be more efficient, and start doing it, start measuring it, and we could branch off from there, right? But the more sophisticated you try to make this, and that's what happens, like you get a tool like Salesforce and you start thinking, okay, marketing needs this, sales needs this, and everybody has something that they want. And by the time you try to get all that, it's so complex, you can't really get what you really need. So you go and you hire, somebody and pay them tens of thousands of dollars so that they can now get the information out that you need. And so you got to be careful that you're not starting with too much, and that you really figure out, okay, what is it that I really need? And then you set it up the right way to begin with, so that you don't get into that complex, expensive problem in the future. Okay. Going back to the target list now, we can search by all of this information. What's the role? What's their revenue? What's the number of employees? Where they're located geographically, the industry vertical, public, private, and then actually information like, Milay said, the intent. It used to be that all of these tools would, they would use Bombara. Bombara really had they owned intent. Now all of these list services have their own, they're starting to develop their own intent data. So we're running out of time, but basically, make sure that you're using a CRM, you have it set up the right way. There's auto dialers now that are becoming a lot more effective. How you email or doing social automation, There's all kinds of great tools, Canva and other tools to make your collateral and your presentations a lot more effective. Every CRM has templated emails and contracts, and making, reducing the amount of time it takes for your salespeople to send emails and to put out contracts, and then again do the lead scoring.
One more
Okay.
tool I'm going to add to that for the presentations. I highly suggest everybody to check out Gamma.ai. I'm sorry, Gamma.app, not Gamma.ai. Gamma is amazing in putting together presentations. I was shocked. I literally put what would normally have taken whatever, maybe a day or two to put together, from a presentation from scratch in PowerPoint. It knocked it out in a matter of a couple hours. I was done with it. So FYI.
All right. Any questions? I know we've expended our hour, but happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
I do.
right.
Probably a very simple question that doesn't address all that you've talked about in terms of data and resources and marketing. But in the very beginning, you talked about a salesperson's time and the balance of time between managing important customers and at the same time finding new customers.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, there used to be a theory that door knocking was a different skill set than the account management. Do you still believe that, especially with all the tools that can begin to open doors beforehand? Could you comment on that, please?
Yes, absolutely. And this is very common in manufacturing because, a lot of times account managers are really good, attentive customer service people, but that doesn't necessarily make you a good salesperson, right? And a lot of times, they're just afraid. They're afraid of being salesy, uh, and so they need to really understand that asking a few more questions about how you can help somebody in a better way is good customer service. Okay. But they're not necessarily the ones that are resilient enough to be banging the phones and doing cold calling and handling all that rejection that comes with it, and really be good at something like that. That's a different type of person. Okay. That would do that. And so, but the other thing I find, else is that, you need to take care of your customers. And so a lot of times, because they're so busy taking care of customers, they don't have time to go out and get new. And so you have to really determine, all right, what what is the amount of time that is required to take care of our top tier customers and make sure that they're taken care of. But if you find out that, well, geez, they're really actually spending a whole lot of time with tier 7 and tier 8. Now that's wasted time potentially. And are there things that we can use? And here we can bring in maybe some tools so those people can buy on their own. Or you have some inside salespeople that can actually just answer questions if they need them, right? So that your more expensive salespeople are spending time with customers or net new prospects that have the potential to be tier 3, not ones that they're always going to be a tier 7. They're never ever going to be a tier 3. Okay.
Hey, Ken, I'm
Yeah.
gonna, I need to cut out. I do apologize that I can't stay through the rest of the questions here. It was great touching base with everybody. I hope the session was helpful, and look forward to joining you guys again at another time. Thanks a lot.
I probably answered your question with a couple of different viewpoints, but did I answer your question?
Well, you did. You indicated that, yeah, it can be a separate talent level. So my question
Yeah.
to you, which I've always wondered, if you have that person that enjoys the excitement of and the adrenaline of knocking and finding new people and opening new doors, all right, once that happens and that customer or those customers become good customers, is there a certain way that you transfer those customers to other people much more attuned to maintaining those accounts? Is that the process? I just wanted to know if you would comment on that as well.
That is common, yes, especially if there's complex projects that come out of the sale. Sometimes you have to do that. I mean, you can't get bogged down on implementation. You got to be out there getting new ones. Okay. Now, the challenge is that is closing the sale, closing the relationship, because there could be ongoing business that comes that you want to be able to continue to be able to bring in. Also, who else do they know? So just because you're handing off implementation of a project doesn't mean that you can't keep in touch with them to be able to get referrals to other net new customers, or make sure that they're happy and that you are getting more business, being proactive with that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
And I also have a question.
Okay.
It's actually more of a marketing question. And the question is, with the advancement of AI and these different tools for marketing, do you think that it shifts, what marketing should look like, especially, in something like manufacturing where it's a very like pinpointed marketing? There's only so many decision makers. It's more like lead generation. Can you put more of a reliance on intent levels like sales using either Sales Nav, Lead IQ, Apollo, something like that? Relying on, let's say, intent and AI, and then rather than putting a larger investment into, let's say, old school marketing, whether it's email campaign or mailing, billboards. I don't know if my question was clear enough, but I guess comparing old school marketing with AI, would it change how you hire within the company?
Yeah, yes, it does. Okay. And so, a lot of things that you're talking about, do you go by Tony or Anthony?
Either or.
Okay. So Tony, how you go to market, it all comes from your sales strategy first. So you need to really figure out, okay, where is your best opportunity for growth, in which market, and who is your ideal client profile? Because all of this stems from that. How you use these tools and which tools you use stem from that, but not until you've got that strategy of like, who are we going to focus on? And I tell my clients, you need to have, each salesperson should have at least 2 markets. You don't want to have one, because what happens if it's not productive? But you don't want to have too many. So let's focus on where your best opportunities are, and it's an internal analysis and external analysis. Then you can figure out what are the marketing and prospecting channels that will work for those particular markets. And that could vary, right? So, for example, I have a client that makes diffusers and grills for HVAC systems, okay? They go to market through distributors because there's HVAC contractors all over the country, right? But one of their biggest growth areas was in clean rooms. Well, clean rooms are design build, and there's very few companies that specialize in that. So that was really a direct sale opportunity. So, the salesperson they hired, we were working on having her develop those relationships, and then really locking up that market, those relationships. So, and developing products that those design build companies wanted, that really shut out some, eliminated some of their competitors. And so you got to determine how you're going to address this market. Then who is it that you need to hire, and what tools do you need to support them? Okay, and it really varies. And then the last thing, I mean, you mentioned email, say for example. I mean, I was talking to my client about that today. I mean, yeah, you can still use email, but if you're using email and you're doing cold emails, you got to start with 5,000. If you want to do automated LinkedIn, then it's 2,500. If you want to just pick up the phone and call really specific people, then you have 200, you're good. Okay, but it depends on what channel you're using and what tools will help support you, and are you executing on the formula? Okay.
Thank
Does that
you.
answer your
Thank
question?
you. Certainly.
Yeah,
And just to recap it to make sure I fully understood. I mean, so first identify the market, or at least the type of business you're looking to acquire,
exactly.
and then you can work backwards from there.
Then you
kind
go,
of
then you go to market strategy, right? So your marketing plan and your prospecting plan, then you can figure out, okay, what are the tools and who are the people and what do they need to be doing? What are the activities they need to be doing? Then you can discern, all right, who do I need to hire and what tools do we need to support them and how are we going to measure it?
Perfect.
'Cause
Thank you
usually
very much.
Yeah, usually people saying, hey, we got to start doing some emails. Well, that's
Yeah,
step 4,
Yep,
right?
for sure. Thank you very much. I do
Okay.
have to run here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the
Well, thanks for
presentation.
participating. I hope it was helpful for you guys. And we'll, yeah, we should probably talk and see if I can give you any more insights about this.
For sure. I'd love to, reconnect. Maybe the three of us, even with Ellis.
Yeah. What do you think, Ellis? I think I talked to you once before, because your EOS implementer there referred us, right?
Yeah, I think so. To
Yeah.
Jack, yes.
Jack Kennelly. Yeah. Would you like to get back together again and talk a little bit further?
Yeah, I think a conversation could be worthwhile. Yes.
Okay. Why don't I send you an email? Maybe we can
Oh.
put some time on the calendar for next week.
Alrighty.
And Ken, I'll email you at least. I'd love to see the recording of today, and
Oh yeah, sure.
I'll follow up.
Oh, let
I
me
do have
stop
to
the
run,
recording.
but
Yeah.
thank you very much again.
I'm gonna
Okay, yeah,
write
my
this
pleasure.
as well. Thank you.